Welcome to Module 2, Part A. This module is part of the screening dimension of the 4S model. The screening dimension tries to answer the question, what type of project is our project? And the answer is related to both the characteristics of the project and the context of the project. In order to do this, in the screening dimension, we will present three models that you can see on the screen. These three models, they do different things and see complexity in different ways, but they are complementary. Why do we present three models? Because as I have mentioned before, there is no one universal model that will address all characteristics of complex projects. So today we will start with the A-feature model. This model is a simple but powerful tool to map where the main challenges of the project are likely to emerge. It was developed in the UK based on the study of more than 40 different projects. This research has identified 8 features of project that help to differentiate one project from another project. The first feature is core versus margin. In this feature, answer the questions: how close is the project to the core operating activities of the organization? In one extreme, we have marginal projects to the business. For example, computerized-based systems for ex-employees or the relocation of administrative functions to other building. All those examples, projects, are marginal projects because they do not affect the survival of the business, and they do not enhance or they do not threaten the survival of the business. On the other extreme, we do have projects whose success or failure is critical for the survival of the organization. For example, here at the university at Griffith, the Learning at Griffith Blackboard system is a critical project, critical for teaching, because everything is done on teaching through the Blackboard system. Or, for example, in the case of a hospital, the implementation of a new patient record system is also crucial for the survival of the organization. The point is that the closer the project is to the core of the business of the organization, the greater the risks and potential rewards for the project manager. The second dimension, the feature, are novel versus familiar projects. So this dimension answers to the question, does the project involve introducing a new and tried solution or a familiar one in the project? Familiar projects use technologies, solutions, procedures that others have already used in similar situations. People understand the context and the likely solution at the start of the project. For example, when McDonald's is opening a new store in a new city, in a different city, they exactly know what and how they will do, what materials, what people and technology they need to use in order to open a new store in other city, because all the stores are the same, using the same resources and the same equipment. For example, another example can be the delivery of a training program to a similar audience. Will be mostly the same solution. Is very well known. Now, on the other extreme, we have novel projects that use methods, technologies, solutions that have never been tried before in the organization. Because the context and the features of the project is uncertain, solutions are usually developed during the development of the project. In this case, there is a high degree of uncertainty about the final result of the project. This means that the project is mostly open and unstructured. At the beginning of the project, people have a very good idea about what is all about the project, but they do not know how to do it in detailed way. When we join the first two features of the model, we will have the four quadrant model of projects. So when we join novel and familiar projects and core and margin projects, we will have four quadrants. And in this case, we will see that they display different features. In quadrant one, for example, the project is perceived as radical but marginal to the business of the organization. The hassle to develop this project is moderate in terms of volume of frustration, conflict, and time consumed in technology or organizational issues. In this quadrant, time scales are flexible and changes can be reversed. And the reason is because they are margin. They are not crucial to the survival of the organization. All this means that the vulnerability of the project manager is low in terms of potential damage to his or her reputation. Projects in quadrant 2 are perceived as incremental. That is, it is likely that there will be few implementation problems. The hassle factor is low. Time, time scales are unimportant, and penalties for errors are minimal. And this is because changes are possible to reverse, and usually they are low budget projects, and in the organization they have already done similar projects before, they are familiar. In this case, also the level of vulnerability to the project manager is low. In the case of quadrant 3, the project is perceived as affecting the core business of the organization, but it is incremental. Example, when we move the Griffith University Health Faculty from Southport to the campus in Gold Coast, that can be considered an incremental but core project. Time and budgets are important because they are high cost projects. Changes are less likely to be reversed, and penalties for mistakes in these quadrant 3 projects are much higher than in quadrant 1 and quadrant 2. Quadrant 4 projects are perceived as affecting the core of the organization. Solutions, technologies, and processes used in those projects are very different from existing arrangements. So, multiple problems are likely to emerge during the development of projects located in quadrant 4. In this case, time and budget are critical because they are high budget projects. Changes are either irreversible or involve long-term commitments, difficult to reverse, and penalties for mistakes are very high. For example, a very good example of this project, of these quadrants or quadrants on these projects are, for example, the constructions of a hospital. I am thinking in the Gold Coast Hospital in Southport. They are high budget projects and mistakes are very expensive to solve and sometimes they are irreversible. There are significant penalties for mistakes. This slide details the core and margin features. Please read it on your own time. This slide details the novel and familiar feature of projects. Please read it on your own time. Quadrant 4 projects are special. They are high cost, highly customized products and services, engineering intensive. They involve the integration of both products and services in a hierarchical network, And products or services and parts are supplied by different stakeholders. The construction, development, and setup of an air traffic control system, for example, is a very good example of a Quadrant 4 project. Similarly, the manufacturing process of an aircraft engine can be also considered in the Quadrant 4 project. The design and implementation of a telecommunication network is also a good example of a Quadrant 4 project. There are too many different technologies that need to be integrated, and probably there are too many suppliers that supply different parts of the network that is implemented by a third party in a different situation. There are some Quadrant 4 projects also that can be highly subjective. And this means that it can be many different interpretations, a lot of open space regarding what to do and how to do. How do we measure success or failure, for example, in the case of an organizational cultural change project? What are the main tasks that we need to develop? What are the main interdependencies between those tasks? What are the main resources that we need? How long time they will take each task? Who will do what? It is very difficult to measure and let alone to have a detailed sequence of tasks or activities in highly subjective projects. They are Quadrant 4 projects because exactly they are difficult to measure. They are highly subjective. And in the case of an organizational cultural change, we can say that they are likely to be Quadrant 4 projects because they are long term and they involve significant investment in the time of the people of the organization in order to change the culture of the organization. For example, this is what's happening in the case of Pricewaterhouse in the Hong Kong branch during the global financial crisis. Because of the crisis, they fired a significant number of staff members. The remaining staff members started to leave the organization because they have too much work and they work with a low culture. And they had to implement this new organizational change in order to keep the people in the organization. Otherwise, without people, a consultancy company will not work. Implementation of a new organizational structure is also an example of a highly subjective Quadrant 4 project because we can define organizational structures in many different ways, and organizational structures are invisible. We don't see them. In summary, complex projects that evolve in Quadrant 4 are a hierarchical network of components and subsystems. Different organizations usually participate at different stages. The high level of interdependencies between key players is important because this means that there is a significant need for coordination and integration activities. They are crucial for success and failure. On the screen you can see additional characteristics of Quadrant 4 project. But at this stage I just want to make three additional observations. First, the categorization of projects is perceptual and differs from setting to setting. That is, the categorization of projects depends on the context. In one context, one project can be in Quadrant 3, and in other contexts, the same or similar project may be in Quadrant 4. The second observation is that projects can migrate from one quadrant to other quadrant over time. Why? Because over time, perceptions and priorities shift. And the final observation is that Quadrant 4 projects are very challenging. They have high level of vulnerability. That is, there are too many things that may go wrong. However, there are high rewards for the project manager. This means that Quadrant 4 project managers will have high visibility, and this means short-term rewards and long-term career paths. The next two features are rapid and gradual, and controversial and uncontroversial. Rapid and gradual projects are all about the pace of the project. Rapid projects put pressure on staff so they have short time to act and to think because quick results are expected in rapid projects. Gradual projects, there is more time to think, there is more time to try alternative solutions. In reality, what we can say is that projects have different degrees of rapid or gradual at different stages of the project. Regarding controversial and uncontroversial projects, uh, we can say that some projects push significant disagreements. For example, a major reorganization in an organization in which there will be less people and more workload means that the project is not neutral. Is a, there will be significant challenges in this project. Or projects in which threaten established interests also, there will be very controversial because there will be a lot of people against the project. Similarly, projects that compete in resources or timing with other projects are controversial because you need to compete with different projects with other project managers. And the key point in controversial projects is that yes, they are difficult to manage. However, they open an opportunity for career visibility and promotion of project managers because the project managers who is successful in dealing with controversial projects will have visibility, and this means promotion. It is interesting to note that in all different types of projects, there are threats and opportunities. For example, in core projects, they demand significant management, pressure, and responsibility, and it is very easy to fail. However, the opportunity for high visibility and career success is also present. In novel projects, also, uh, cost and time overruns are very common. However, the opportunity is that it is very hard to compare with other project because your novel project is unique. Think in the Sydney Opera House against which other project you can compare the Sydney Opera House project. Difficult to compare. In a similar way, rapid projects demand quick outcomes and quick results. However, the opportunity is that you can have and you can ask for a more flexible budget because quick results need more money, obviously, more resources. In controversial projects, of course, that you will find significant resistance. But if you are successful, you will get significant visibility and credit, and that will improve your career prospects as a project manager. This slide details a bit more rapid and gradual projects. Please read it on your own time. Please read these additional details regarding controversial and uncontroversial projects. There are other aspects that may help or constrain the development of the project. The key is that those aspects are only partly under control of the project manager. This is because those aspects reflect how other players interpret and react to events in your project. Changing goals is the next dimension of the model. We know that goals in projects evolve, especially in long term large projects. Sometimes goals change because the owner or customers add new features or new demands to the specification of the project. This is very common, of course, in novel projects and large projects. The implication for the project manager is that it is necessary to manage expectations of all those involved. It's necessary to tell different stakeholders in different ways the goals may change. It is necessary to explain why, and it is in order to lower the level of uncertainty of the project. Here we have some example of changing goals. Of course, we know that a market may change, or the needs of the organization or the needs of the actual project. The organizational structure of the project also may change, and this may influence on what can be achieved on the project. Or simply key management positions can be shifted, and this also may affect how and what we can achieve in the project. Here you can see some questions that may help the project manager to check if goals are changing. Outside links is about people or organizations who are outside the project but that may affect the project in significant extent. Today, organizations are highly interdependent. We know that organizations and projects are connected to other organizations in different degrees and in different ways. This means that projects depend on different stakeholders. This involves working with people from different organizations. The key point is that these people is not under direct control of the project manager. Also, it is important to be aware that other organizations, for sure, that may have and do have different priorities, different demands, different resources, and this will affect our project. Here we have some typical examples of outside links. When you wait for a decision or an action taken by other division of the organization or even other organization. Or for example, when you implement a new information system that need to be used by three major divisions in the same organization, but two divisions agree and the third dimension does not agree, don't want to use the system or is resistant to the use of the system. And this is a real example that we have in the past, of course. Here we have additional example of outside links that, of course, the project managers cannot control, such as, for example, suppliers' actions or customers' demands or changing market conditions, or actually the appearance of new technological developments, or the key managers change jobs and they go to other projects, and these aspects are totally out of the control of the project manager. But you as a project manager, you need to be aware that this may happen at any time and you need to manage these aspects. Senior instance is about the attitude of top managers towards your project. Their attitude is critical to the outcomes of your project. We know that top managers' actions and words affects the ability of the project manager to deliver the project. Why? Because top managers shape the organizational context of the project. If the project is complex, for example, it is important that top managers will be able to tolerate risk and ambiguity. All these features, of course, bring threats and opportunities to the project and to the project manager. Regarding outside links, we know that outside links may increase the uncertainty of the project. But this also opens an opportunity for the project managers for career visibility if he or she knows how to deal with this additional uncertainty. Regarding changing goals, we know that when goals change, maybe you will run out of cost or run out of time. The opportunity is that you can justify delays and you can claim extra budgets because the goals have changed. Regarding supportive senior stance, they may have higher expectations regarding the development of the project. This opens the opportunity to access additional resources. In summary, projects can be perceived as novel but marginal in quadrant 1 or as incremental in quadrant 2. That is, they are low budget projects in which they are reversible and there's not many issues because they are doing a familiar project. That is, the solution that they are using is very well known to the company. In the case of quadrant 3, projects affect the core business of the organization, but they are incremental. Time and budgets are important, of course. In quadrant 4, time and budget are critical to the survival of the organization, and changes are non-reversible. That is, any mistakes, it will be very costly. Something that is important to notice from this four quadrant model is that this typology of projects is that the role of the project manager is conditioned by the context in which the project evolves. In other words, the project can be in any of these four quadrants, but this depends not only on the actual features of the project, but also it depends on the context in which the project evolves. Another aspect that we need to consider is project visibility. And this means how visible is the project for all the stakeholders. In projects that have high visibility, there's high level of vulnerability in the project, but also the potential level of rewards is very high. In the case of low visibility projects, we can see that the level of vulnerability is low, but also the rewards associated to this type of projects are low. If we think in our four quadrant model, quadrants 4 and 1 are a representative of high visibility projects, and quadrants 1 and 2 are representative of low visibility projects. So the idea of visibility is important for the project manager. If you want to advance your career, you need to go to high visibility projects. Yes, they are much more challenging and much more difficult to deal with, but also the rewards are much more larger than low visibility projects. The visibility of the project is connected to the level of vulnerability of the project. Vulnerability of the project is the scale and complexity of problems facing the project manager. It is related to the degree of uncertainty and risk involved in the project. This idea of vulnerability is important because we can anticipate the degree of resistance that the project is likely to generate, the degree of resistance and the number of difficulties or issues that may appear during the development of the project. The level of vulnerability is affected by three things. First, the views and expectations of top managers. managers who support your project. It's also affected by the nature of the problem, by the nature of the project. That is, it is a new project, it is in quadrant number 4, it's something that nobody have ever done before. And third, the level of vulnerability is also connected to that resource available. Of course, if we have much more higher number of resources, well, still there is vulnerability, but we can cope better with those vulnerable points. And if we have low level of resources, it will be more difficult to cope, to deal with vulnerability in a project. In this slide, you can see what I mean by high vulnerability context and low vulnerability context. In the case of high vulnerability context, you can see that there are many significant challenges. There are many uncertainties regarding technology, regarding government regulations, regarding people support. Maybe there will be a lot of resistance. Maybe there will be little agreement regarding how to do things. On the other hand, in low vulnerability contexts, the problems and the solutions are well known. This means that inputs, the processes, and the outputs are also stable, and usually there is wide agreement among all the stakeholders, so we can expect a low level of hassle and issues. The key point here that I want to make is that there is a close relationship between the type of project and the context. This means that context shapes your project. For example, a simple conventional project using a very well-known technology may turn into a nightmare in a high vulnerability context. The level of vulnerability of projects is very important for project management because there is a close connection between the level of vulnerability of the project and the agenda that the product manager needs to follow. I mean, which part of the project need to put more importance or need to focus the project manager. In low vulnerability projects, project managers cannot act in the same way than in high vulnerability projects. We know that low vulnerability projects are rational projects. That is, there is a clear what to do, clear inputs, clear outputs, and clear processes. So the content is very clear. And next, the focus needs to be on planning and control activities because budgets and time are important. And only in third place, the focus needs to be on the processes because managing this project is likely to be less problematic. As I mentioned, there's little uncertainty regarding goals, activities, sequence of activities, resources, and people's roles. In high vulnerability projects, this is different. The agenda is totally different. You see that the first and the most important aspect that the project manager needs to attend is the process, the how to do things. And by process, I mean that the project managers need to focus their efforts in building alignment between different stakeholders, in coping resistance, in dealing with unexpected events, and of course, dealing with politics and social issues associated to the project. Why? Because, as I mentioned, complex projects have many uncertainties, and when there are many uncertainties, there are disagreements among and between stakeholders. In second place, the project manager needs to focus on control. It is important control because complex projects are high cost multi-billion dollar projects and time and budgets are very important. And in number three comes the content of the project, like what to do. The content of the project in high vulnerability projects is in the third place because at the beginning of the project, the content, the goals of the project, the scope of the project are very unclear. They have not been defined. And that is why we need to focus on the process in order to try to define and redefine and to arrive at an agreement regarding what to do in the project, regarding the scope of the project, regarding the features of the project. And that is why content is in number 3 and the process agenda is in number 1. It's the most important aspect. In summary, low vulnerability projects need to be managed in a very different way than high vulnerability projects. To better understand the 8-feature model, it is necessary to apply it. So please attempt to develop the Digital Europe Part A case study that is based on a real case and it is available in Learning at Griffith. And notice that this exercise has two parts. In the first part, you need to map the project in the 4-quadrant model, and in the second part, you need to map the project using the tool that is enclosed in the next assignments in order to see whether your project is high or low vulnerability. During the workshops, we will develop and discuss this project with face-to-face students. And if you are an online student, please attempt to develop this case and we will discuss in the collaborate section. If you are an experienced project manager, it could be very useful that if you try to apply this model to one specific project that you know very well. And we will be discussing this in collaborate or in the workshop. Finally, please use the bridge building case and apply the 8-feature model in order to see where this project sits in the map. We will be discussing again this case in the workshops and in the Q&A collaborate sessions.